That robot keeps stealing my tools. It takes them out of the toolbox and it goes off screen and I never see them again. But yet the toolbox never empties. Just like this show. Welcome to Creator Toolbox. This is a show where we bring you all of the tools for you, our creators, the builders, the developers, the admins out there that want to know more about the ServiceNow platform. This is for you. We have some juicy tidbits and we are in the midst of Vancouver season. As Earl uses his left hand to point to the Vancouver logo, you can always tell what release you're looking at. Well, going back a couple of years anyway, since we got that cool logo up there. So you know if you're looking at Tokyo content, Utah content, this is Vancouver, released in Q3 of 2023. And we have one of my favorite features. But before we get into that, let's do some quick introductions. My name is Chuck Tomasi. I am a senior ServiceNow developer advocate. I don't know where I was going with that. It's early and I'm having troubles focusing. So this is live, not edited. I've been with the company since 2010 and was a customer for a couple of years before that with a long history going back about 40 years into computers, development, and tech. So I'll play the old man card any chance I get. Over to you, Earl.
I will not play the old man card. Hi, everyone. I am Earl Duque. I am also a senior developer advocate here at ServiceNow. I've been with the company for 2 years, but before that, I was doing about 4 to 5 years of development for different customers, mostly in higher ed. And before that, since we're talking about the whole career, before that, I was actually in student affairs, doing a lot of student development theory stuff within the higher education space. And to Julia.
All right. Good morning, folks. Speaking to you today from Chicago, Illinois. My name is Julia Perlis. I'm a principal product manager here at ServiceNow, working on decision management and other initiatives as part of the workflow automation team. This is an extra special release for me because I am Canadian. So big up for the Vancouver release. And I've been at ServiceNow almost exactly 3 years at this point. So nice. Very exciting milestone in terms of being at the company and, you know, another time around on Creator Toolbox. So I'm happy to be here.
We're happy to have you.
Yeah, I was in Chicago last week when it was nice and hot.
Oh, it was hot. It was like 100 degrees, felt like 110. And I was just very grateful that I can work from my apartment and didn't have to leave.
Coming from Phoenix, Arizona, I thought you might want some warm weather.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Brought a little with
back again.
And then I left on Thursday and took it back with me.
It was very kind. Thanks.
Well, you have been on this show once or twice. This and Live Coding Happy Hour, a combination. Your face should be no stranger to those who have watched our videos in the past. And usually talking about one of my favorite topics, as I mentioned before, Decision Builder and decision tables and all the cool stuff. So I am very excited to let you show us today what is new in Vancouver around Decision Builder, because I think this is going to make a big difference.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I think we've started getting into some features that have been long requested, things that are going to make decision tables and Decision Builder even more powerful and make the developer experience smoother and safer, frankly, like allowing for safer editing, safer authoring, and bringing some testing capabilities right into the building experience instead of what it used to be, which was create your decision table, drop it in a flow, go test your flow. So we're really trying to make things as easy to use as possible. That is a constant theme as we continue to prioritize our roadmap for decision tables, because it is what can be and should be such a simple but powerful tool. And I think, hopefully we see today both the ways building decision tables is easy, but also how it can make managing your flows and your workflow, so much easier and more flexible.
Mm-hmm. I got to ask you, Julie, real quick. Decision tables, are they intended to be a replacement for the lookup tables that we've had for a while?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think decision tables can serve a bunch of different purposes, but I would think of them as more powerful lookup tables. A lot of our customers are using some of their custom table allocations to create these lookup tables where you don't want to have a flow with a bunch of if statements. You want to be able to just say, take this in, evaluate it against a set of rules, and then return a result. With decision type tables, you get a UI to build that, and you're not using any of your custom table limits to do it. So you can author your decision tables, manage your logic in those decision tables, and then rather than calling out to a custom lookup table, you can actually just point to a decision table to be able to take in some data, run some rules on it, and then figure out whatever you need from that, whether that's another record, whether it is, a score or a decimal or a percentage or a string value. It's kind of like souping up the concept of a lookup table.
It's also built into Flow Designer. They're coupled together, decision tables and Flow Designer. Whereas if you had made a custom lookup table, you'd have to do some scripting around it with a glide filter call. And that's the way I've traditionally used them up until the point where decision tables came out.
Yeah, absolutely. And, safe harbor things that we say and hope for and work towards, but hopefully with the upcoming release, we'll also have decision tables built into Process Automation Designer. So, even more utilities around being able to quickly and easily integrate the logic that you're building in your decision tables into the workflows and processes that you're building.
Awesome. Well, do you have a presentation or demo, or how do you want to approach this?
I think we should just jump right into a demo. I mean, I could show you a slide that says Decision Builder, but I think everyone just wants to get the goods.
So the two main capabilities that we're looking at that are added to Vancouver, if I understand right, are publishing and testing. Which would you like to do first?
I kind of built them all in together. We'll start with the draft authoring, and then we'll build testing in with that as well.
Okay.
And then I'll throw in a few bonus features along the way.
I understand you have a fun use case for us too.
I do. I was, for all the folks joining us today, I was telling Chuck and Earl that I was working on this presentation and my two cats were just harassing me and sitting on my computer. So we'll be walking through a cat adoption application and running some rules around those adoption applications, just in case I need to rehaul these cats of mine. No, just kidding. They're wonderful, except they're locked in my room right now so that they don't join our call.
Let's take a look.
All right. Pull up this demo screen here. All right. Are we set up with the screen share?
Yep.
We're doing good.
Fantastic. So what I'm going to try to do today, and please, add questions as you have them. I'm happy to stop along the way and answer questions. Also, if you lose the thread of the demo, Chuck or Earl, please bring me back. But what I was envisioning is, showing the way decision tables work, can work with a flow, and then also showcasing the different features as we go through this use case. So the concept we're going to work with here is an application for a pet adoption. So this flow is going to run automation around that adoption application. And I've put the bones here. So the application will be created. That's a custom table I've created in my application. And then the process for managing incoming applications for this organization is that the first thing they do is check the finances. And that's just a couple questions on the application. Then they're going to, based on some other information, determine whether the person applying is even eligible to adopt a pet. And then if they're eligible, we're going to score their application, kind of create that tiers of how desirable is this applicant. And then at the same time, we'll figure out what staff member at the adoption agency should be responsible for this application. And as you can see, each of these steps here are actually calling out to different decision tables. So here where you see this dot and 3 lines, this is actually flow logic here under the make a decision action. And I'm sure for many of you, if you're not yet using decision tables, or if you're, building flows with more built-in logic, what you would expect to see is a flow like this would not be 6 actions. It would probably be
A lot.
4 actions and 30 logic steps, where all of the if statements around figuring out whether someone's financially acceptable for adoption would be built into the flow. And then there would be nested if statements with nested if statements with nested if statements. So even before we've looked at the logic in the decision tables, you can see here that this flow is very simple and consistent. So you could totally transform your program around how you determine financial viability, how you check eligibility, how you score. And we'll do some of that in this demo, and it wouldn't change anything about this flow. Your flow could stay consistent. If you are upgrading, making changes, like this could stay the way it is, and then you're building all of the actual nuances of your process into the decision table.
It feels like
yeah,
what you would
ahead.
expect somebody learning coding.
Yeah.
Brute force first.
Your first ones would be a million nested if statements, and then you would realize like, oh, I should probably push this into a function off by itself and then call that function, make it reusable and stuff like that. Same thing right here.
Yeah, it's exactly. And you can imagine someone on the program side handing the developer like okay, here, we need to check applications. First, we need the finance check, then we do the eligibility check, then we do the scoring, and then we figure out who to assign it to. And if it were a totally new developer, they might build it all into one thing. And if it were someone more seasoned, they'd be like, no, let's modularize this. So that's really what we're doing here.
Well, that's the part about decision tables and formerly lookup tables that still exist. I shouldn't say they're gone, but it abstracts that decision-making logic from the workflow, from the flow in this case. So if requirements change, and they usually do, where they say, oh, you no longer need this particular eligibility criteria, you don't go back to the flow, you go to the decision table, or maybe even delegate that and say, hey, it's your decision table, you make the change, you test it out, and when it's ready, I don't really have to do anything. And as developers, we love that.
Exactly. And for me, I mean, even preparing for this demo, I was making changes all over the place, and I kept coming back to the flow and being like, do I have to change this? And I was like, oh, no, I don't. This still works. So what
if you had like specific cases? I know you can put a decision table into multiple output criteria, and if the decision table changes its criteria, let's say, for example, we're doing airline points or something.
Yeah.
They have silver, gold, platinum, and diamond as their levels. Today, the criteria is 25,000 miles to get to silver. Tomorrow, it's 30,000. In that case, you wouldn't have to change because the output is still, you are silver status. Here's what you get.
Yeah.
But if they change from silver and maybe add a bronze, and you only had those 4 cases before, you would have to go into the flow and make a case for bronze, correct?
You would. It depends a little bit on how you are managing it. I tend to, so within the make a decision action, you can use branches, which automatically creates branches based on unique results. That's, to me, there's pros and cons, and it really depends on how you work and what you're trying to do. The pros of the branches is that if you add bronze as an option, it would automatically add a new branch for bronze. You would still have to go into the flow and say what you want to do when it's bronze if you're trying to path your flow in different directions based on that result.
Right.
If all you're trying to do is update a field with the new loyalty program, if you add bronze, your flow still wouldn't change. It would just be that maybe sometimes it. Right. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. But if you're trying to path based on unique results, then you either do that with this use branches function, and then when you come in, it would automatically have that new branch, and you just either move things or copy things or create that new pathing underneath it. Or you can take a little bit more control of it and use if statements based on results. So if you look at this flow here, we have an eligibility check, and then what I've done is say, this is based on the result of the decision. So I'm saying this decision table has a result for whether someone is not eligible. And then I've used that result from the decision table to say, if they're not eligible is false. So if they are eligible, then go down this path. And so what that means is that if the results change, nothing will automatically change in my flow because I've kind of hard-coded that pathing. So there's trade-offs to doing it different ways. I think it's worth thinking about, what are the likelihood of the different results changing? Additionally, when you use branching, it creates parallel branches. So you want to make sure that you actually want parallel versus sequential branching if you're going to go with that approach.
I gotta put a plug in here for the Flow Designer people. I love the new look. It's so clean.
Yeah. All of the incremental improvements are looking fantastic. All right, well, let's jump in. So I'm going to show you a few different things that are new in Decision Builder. I've already created a decision table for checking finances, but I do want to show you what it looks like in our new creation experience with a slight modification to enable draft authoring. So as you can see from Flow Designer, you can always create a new decision table right in there. One of the things that is on our roadmap and we're working towards for a couple of releases is really improving and expanding the inline authoring experience. So when you click this plus button, how can you use data that is already in your flow to make it even faster and easier to create a decision table? So
Nice.
coming soon-ish to an instance near you.
Safe harbor, safe harbor, safe harbor.
Very safe harbor. So within creating a new decision table, if you've been working in Decision Builder before, you'll see mostly familiar stuff here. You have a name, you have a description. You know, this can be our creator toolbox example table for fun.
Very, very creative.
I know, I'm like that. And then you can determine, you know, where do you want this to be accessible from. This checkbox here is new and is part of draft authoring. So right now, when you create a decision table, it either exists or it doesn't. You know, if you create it, it's automatically active. It's automatically available to be executed, to be dropped into a flow. What we're doing with safer editing is allowing you to create things in a draft state and edit in a draft state before you make any of your logic available for someone to actually drop into their flow or drop into their process or call from a script. So this will now, from V5 forward, be enabled by default. And you can see, and we have a little bit of a description of what this actually means. If it's enabled, you can author your decision table in a draft format. This is optional. So for at a decision table level, you can turn this off. But let's turn it on and see what that changes from our creation experience. So if anyone's used Decision Builder before, for those who have, this will look super familiar. There are a few new things you'll see on the interface. The first is this view toggle. Right now, we are looking at a draft. You can see that the decision table is inactive, which means you can't use it, you can't execute it yet. And then we have some new buttons up here. We have the test button, we have the ability to create a draft, and then to publish. So this is the new creation experience when you're enabling draft authoring. And what it means is that anything new that you're creating in a draft format. And once you've added a certain number of artifacts, so once you have an input and you have at least one row in your table and you have at least a condition column and a result column, then you're able to publish that decision table. And once it's published, it'll be available for use. And we'll take a look at what that actually looks like in action.
Is that something you could change later? Like I've got all these decision tables that I'd like to add that to.
That is a great question, Chuck. And actually the first thing I wanted to show you with an example. So
She's good.
How about that? Let's look at, this is, if we go back to our flow, the first thing we're doing is checking finances. So here's a decision table for checking finances. The inputs here, you can see I'm using individual fields. This is more to show off testing down the line, but probably what you would do is just take in an application as the input, a reference input, and then you would build your logic based on that reference input for flexibility's sake. But this is a decision table that was built without without draft authoring. So you can see here, you're missing all those buttons. You don't have the toggle, you don't have create draft, you don't have publish. This decision table just exists and is active. But what we can do is go into properties here.
Ding, 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 ding.
Easy.
And you can see that we are able to enable draft authoring. And what happens when we do that, you might ask? Many a conversation to determine the logic that takes place here. But basically, if you enable draft authoring for something that was previously just a black and white active decision table, what will happen is it will then become a published decision table.
Okay.
Because what we didn't want to do was say, okay, this was active, but now that you have drafting enabled, it's draft and you can't use it anymore. We wanted to make sure that you were still able to use it, you're still able to execute it, but you're just now dropped into the new flow of work for what happens when you're using drafting and publishing.
Existing behavior.
So what that practically means, and what you'll see with published and draft decision tables, is that this decision table is published. We don't have a draft version yet because you only had one version of it. It was published. That's what it is. And what changes between the old way of doing things in this way is that now that this is published, it's become read-only. So you can no longer make changes to it. You can see everything about it. You can take a look at information about your condition columns. You can see what's in the table. But if you want to make changes to it, you need to create a draft. And what that will do is just copy everything that's in your published version and generate this new draft for you. And you'll see our toggle went over to draft. If you want to make changes here, like let's say, you know, I actually did Google what the average budget is to own a cat and a bird for a year. Fun fact.
Okay.
But let's say, you know, things change. cats are needing a lot more these days. It used to be greater than $600, and now we need people to have more than $800 available to care for these cats.
8 is still low for my cat.
I mean, it's definitely low for mine, but they're like my children, so I didn't want to apply my own budgets to this logic. Didn't seem reasonable.
PII on your pet.
I don't think cats are going to suffer if they don't have like every new toy available for them.
Not so much the toys, it's the vet.
Yeah, I mean, pet insurance is a game changer, that's for sure.
Pet food doubled for me in the past year.
Wow. I know. I always live in fear that they're going to have like an obscure allergy and I'm going to end up buying like kangaroo meat or something.
Ours just keeps changing. It's like, I don't feel like eating that stuff anymore. Now I got to go find what he does eat.
So now that we have this, we can actually take a look at, the finance check. Initially, when we had that published version, as you can see, this is what's running. If you have it in a flow, to check about the finances,
cool.
We just see if they can pay their adoption fee. If they can't, then they're not financially viable. If they can pay the adoption fee and their budget's more than $600 and they're trying to get a cat, then they have financial viability. And then there's different logic for birds. But now we can go back and look at our draft and see that has been changed to 800.
And a default result, we got a cheer from the crowd.
Big cheer for the default result, which is a huge game changer in terms of covering all bases. And you'll see that this is similar. It's similar to what you get in Flow Designer. If you're in Flow Designer, you have a flow, you save it, you can activate it.
Right.
And then you can work on it without changing the version that's active. But what we wanted to do with this kind of initiative and decision builder, and we're trying to kind of move forward in our different builders and automation areas, and then take a page from everyone else's and like move forward together, but it's going to happen in jumps and spurts across releases and across product, but really be able to let you see both, because we find that's, it's feedback we get for Flow Designer. We wanted to get ahead of that for this and be able to say, if you're clicking execute right now, this is the logic you're using, but here's the work in progress. And what that sets us up to do is in the future, also be able to have version history, potentially the ability to revert to past versions, to name your versions. If you had, a version that you're using for a certain time of year, like a promotional version of your decision table, this just lets you keep that history. And what we're hoping to build towards in the future for versioning is having more of that version history, so that you can see what it was. You can see at a point in time what rules were running within your flow. And then be able to do kind of more auditing and understanding of how your logic was acting in your workflows.
Who made the changes?
Yeah. And who made the changes. Exactly.
Admin. So, stop logging in as admin. Everybody logs in as admin.
No, but
let's jump in and look at a couple other features, shall we?
Yeah.
Let's see. So we took a look at the finance check. The next thing I want to do is let's build this decision table for scoring the application. I've already built the structure here. We have an input for the application. This decision table corresponds to this step in the flow where we're going to score the application. And you can see that we're taking in that application record to return the score. But we don't actually have any rules in here yet. So we're gonna, throw out to the export and edit an Excel feature, because even for me, that's the easiest way to build a bunch of rows in a decision table when I'm feeling particularly lazy. And then you can see from here, there we go, that we have this empty decision table. It has our structure in it. We can go in and say, if they were a prior pet owner and they want more than one pet. It is very desirable for adoption agencies if you want more than one cat. I know that. And if they don't go on vacation much, that's also an important thing. Is they only go on vacation for 0 to 4 weeks a year. Mm-hmm. Then we can say they're tier 1. And I've already jumped the gun on this and built the logic, so you don't need to watch me make things. Keep things simple. We can save this and then go back into Decision Builder and directly import those rules.
I feel like on a live coding happy hour, I try to build the logic and stuff like that live, and now everyone has learned don't do what Earl did.
I've done it enough, and I've done it in like smaller demos, and I just realized I'm boring everyone. So why bother with that? But here we go. We have now a great decision table. We can save this. As you can see, like is true across our products, a lot of the utilities are disabled until you save. It just creates a lot of confusion when you can muck around with things that are not saved. So once you save here, it opens up your world of options. We can start testing, we can publish. And if you think about a typical workflow, you can build this logic, and then maybe with this logic, we want to run some tests and make sure it's working the way we expect it to work before we publish the decision table. So let's click this test button. It is
I love that test button.
incredibly
Oh my gosh.
powerful and not incredibly snazzy, but it does the trick. You can see here, you're able to choose which version you're testing. Right now, we only have a draft, so we can only test the draft. You can test using the two different execution methods for decision tables. So you can either return the first decision that matches rules, or you can return all decisions that match. The first one will give you a single result. The second will give you a list of results. And then for this, it'll just surface whatever the input is. So here, the input is just the application. And I'm going to show you, let's see, this is a list of some example applications so that we can figure out what the test result actually should be. I put some notes in here. So, just, no one needs to kind of like go their way through the logic. I'll just let you know. So let's say we're going to test out this Morgan pet owner application. They want a cat. They are away 0 to 4 weeks a year. They've had pets before. They want 2 cats. Oh, they're a dream owner. We're really pro Morgan pet owner. So let's look for that record here. And then once we run the test, we will not get an application key tier. That's not promising. Oh, I know why. I didn't update my test data. I made a bit of a midstream change part of the way, and then didn't actually change it in here.
Working as intended.
Here we go. There we go.
Woo!
I was doing a choice list for the weeks away, and I was like, that's a number. What am I doing? So we're back at it. What you can see here is like we expect, that's working for this use case. Let's take a look at more test data here where, let me just put that field on here so I can make some updates. Estimated weeks away. All right. So
let's steal this use case for an upcoming demo that I've got.
Hey, go for it. I'm happy to share it. Any more talk of cats on ServiceNow demos, I think, is a win for everybody.
Pets and plants. We got a lot of demos around plants too.
Really?
Yeah, we do actually.
That's a good one. All right, let's take a look at Chloe Cat Mom. They're away 5 to 10 weeks a year. They've had pets before. They want more than one. So really, it's a bit of a concern that they're going to be gone for 8 weeks, but still a possible good owner. Amazing. Not the right logic. What did I muck up here? I'm sorry, guys.
Don't be. You're demonstrating why the test feature is so important to have.
It's actually true. I'm like, what did I do wrong that this is showing up as tier 1?
Because otherwise we would need to be running actual records every single time or running scripts to test these things each time. So you're demonstrating why it's important to have the test feature.
Oh, I can't tell you how many decision tables I've built a bespoke flow for just to test the decisions.
Oh, that's why. I see why. Ha. It actually is true. We did just realize why this feature is important. I was like, that's not supposed to be the result. All right, let's try it again.
Perfect. This was all planned. Julia, this is all of that.
No one will ever know if it was or not.
Hey, it's something that you just taught somebody to look for. It's like if it's not giving you the results, you either check your source data or you check your decision table.
That's true. How do you debug? So here you can see we actually we've got it now. This one is tier 2, which is exactly what we expected. I'll show you what it looks like when you execute all decisions. In this use case, it doesn't make any sense because you're only going to return 1 tier. But let's say you were trying to use a decision table to figure out what notifications to send, and it might be more than one. And you want to generate a list of notifications, or you want to generate a list of people who should be on the watch list for a certain record, for example. In that case, you might want to go through your rules and say every time, like, if this is true, this person should be part of the list. And if this is true, this person should be part of the list. And that's really returning a list of results. And I'll show you what that looks like, even though is not super relevant for this use case. So in that case, what you'll see is just your test return one result, and you'll just see this kind of scroller between the results. So if you had 4 different results, you'd just be able to click between them and see what they all are.
Nice.
So keeping it simple, but keeping it powerful. And it is great that, here we can publish this decision table. We've tested it. We've figured out that it's actually working correctly. In this case, we don't want a default result because everything should be covered by these scenarios. And if it's not covered, we don't want to score the application. So we don't want any catch-all. You get a little warning when you publish, because once you publish, you have to create a new draft to make changes.
Yep.
On the topic of drafts, Julia, we have a question. Are drafts tied to the user that's creating the draft, or are they like workflows where any dev admin will modify the draft, and then when it publishes for everyone? Can there be multiple drafts? How does that work?
Right now, the draft is tied to the decision table, not a user. There can only be one draft. So your decision table is either, if you're using draft authoring, it's either in draft or in published. And if it's in published, it might also have a draft associated with it. So you can see in this case, we have a published decision table. There's no draft right now because no one's working on it. It's active. This is read only. If we want to make changes to it, we can create a draft. And then from there, it's still active because the decision table has a published version that's running in the world.
I like that. Because the old workflows, so many times I'd go in to edit a workflow, says, Earl already has that checked out. And Earl's on PTO. I want to get that.
Thanks, Earl.
And well, so what I like about all the decisions that are going into how this UI is made is it's all lending to letting delegated people in production have a handle on the data side of things. For workflow and other source stuff, it makes sense to have multiple versions and then have a merge thing at the end of it, because that's all configuration stuff. Decision table is based off of data. And so when it's all based around data, if you are giving a citizen developer or some other tenant in your organization the ability to update these decision tables, then it makes sense to not give them the complications of what if multiple drafts have a merge conflict. No, they work together to figure out what the draft is, and then they publish it together. It makes sense for if you're giving this to certain people to update live, kind of thing. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of continued thinking and work to do on our side, is like, how do we build around some of those complicated scenarios around drafting and versioning. I will say that technically, like, we view this as data. Technically, the rows in a decision table are metadata. So official best practice is doing it in subprod, not production. But figuring out the right, you can certainly have someone make these changes in prod. You just have to, if you wanted it back in your subprod matching, you'd have to sync it back. But between what we're doing with flow, what we're doing with processes, what we're doing with decision tables, we're trying to figure out what is the right consistent experience for versioning, for having that, draft and publish experience, for making sure that things are the same across our products where they should be, and they're different where they should be. My ask and call out to folks who are either watching like part of our session today or watching in the future is, reach out to us with your specific use cases around drafting and publishing and versioning. We want to make sure that we're tackling this really complex area in a way that actually matches what our customers are trying to do and adds value, instead of creating the need for workarounds. So, for us, we kind of intentionally decided to start with this simplified way of doing things, just saying it's published or it's draft, you have one draft, rather than, investing 2 releases and building this whole experience around versioning and then putting it out in the world and getting feedback and hearing back like, actually, it's not quite how it works. So we want to approach this incrementally, really working with our customers to understand what's going to be most valuable to build experiences that work for them.
We did have a question earlier. What is the history button?
Oh, it's the Excel history.
Okay.
It's your import export history. And if you have error files, you can get them here too.
Nice.
Yeah. And so even when it's in read only, you can still export, you can still look at your history. If we go back to this draft, this is what we're actually going to do. Let's make some changes to this decision table. So I'll export it again. Oh, well, that's what I was going to add a column. I'm trying to remember my own demo. I have notes here. So right now, let's say we want to have some different logic for whether someone's trying to get a bird versus a cat. We can add a column here for pet requested. This will be from the application. Let's look at the animal type. So if they're trying to adopt a cat, we care about whether they were a prior pet owner, whether they want more than one pet, and how many weeks away they are. Let's say that if you're adopting a bird, you can leave birds for a long time. I don't know. I'm not a bird owner. I have cats, can't have birds. But maybe if you are adopting a bird, in that vein, it's really important that you don't have any other pets in the house. So let's say like other pets, we can add another column here. That is other pets in the house. And we'll build out this logic even further to include our lovely bird owning friends.
I love when all the buttons are grayed out before you hit save.
Yes, as do I. So you can see here's our existing logic. Let's say we make changes here. All of this logic is for when someone's trying to adopt a cat.
Gosh, it's so well formatted already.
Thank you so much.
Even the colors are right.
So much work went into this lovely Excel template, but what I like about it is that it's both easy to read and use, but you don't lose the power of Excel. Because I think it can be really hard to have Excel experiences where you want to put controls on it, but then it makes Excel kind of unusable. And so that's really what we were trying to strike the balance between. And then here we can say, all right, if they're gonna get a bird, we care if they've had a pet before, we care if they want more than one pet. We no longer care about how many weeks they're gonna be away. And we want to know if there's other pets in the house. So if this is true, if this is false, that's going to change our logic. And I did actually build this elsewhere too, so that we don't need to do what I'm doing.
You're going fast. I'm impressed with your Excel skills.
All right, let's see. Let's just copy this because I think I got everything else in there.
I always appreciate a veteran Excel user.
I spent the first 3 years of my career just like spending hours and hours and hours and hours of the day in Excel. So yep. I was one of those people who was like, if you can't do it quickly, Google it every single time, because otherwise you'll drive yourself nuts. All right, so we can import this. We've got our new logic in here for our birds. And then same thing once that's saved. All right, we can take a look at what our draft has. We can take a look at what our published version has. And the cool thing is this really gets at what we were saying at the beginning of this demo, which is that if you make this change, this decision table is taking in an application, it's spitting out an application tier. That's true here, and it's still true with this version. It's taking in an application, it's spitting out an application tier. So when we publish this change, and let's go ahead and publish it, we probably want to run some, we'll run one test. We'll be responsible.
I
All right.
was about to say, I was like,
Let's look at the test for the aspiring pet parent bird. They should be tier 3. Actually, this doesn't matter for them anyway. So where did we go with that? The aspiring pet parent bird is tier 2, probably because of the logic I set up. Let's see. They're a prior pet owner. They only want one. And
Do they have other
pets in the house? Let's see if they do. Other pets in the house. They do have other pets. So if they have other pets in the house. Other
This is
pets
false.
are true. This one is false. And this is true. Oh, tier 2. Okay, it's my own fault. My logic was correct. So we have tested it. It works correctly. We could publish it. Same thing. It'll tell you when you publish it. What happens is basically this bumps off the last published version. So this will become the version that is running whenever you're executing your decision table now.
That's pretty dang impressive, Julia, because I was thinking if you had to do that same type of, we want to add a new criteria to our decision. We want to add some values and we're going to have different results. Ignore these other ones. Pretty much what you did in that Excel spreadsheet. If you tried that in Flow, that would be hard. If you tried that in code, that would be really hard. It would, and to take the time to test it and everything you just did really collapsed that time frame. So I just want to keep talking to my inner voice of old programmer that this is a better way.
Well, and I think it's, like you and Earl were saying, there's like these natural patterns we fall into. It's like, it's so easy to create the if statements. It's so easy to write this and this. But if you can kind of nest this in your brain from the start, it makes your life so much easier down the line.
Oh, absolutely. I think I conferred with you, what was it, about a year ago, when I was looking at somebody else's code that had a lot of script to figure out, as we get closer to an event, we want to do this integration more and more frequently, a week apart, then a day apart, then hours, and even minutes. And I asked her, can you do date differences in decision tables? You said yes. And I was able to take a whole bunch of code that took me, it was a non-trivial amount. It wasn't an afternoon, but it took a while to figure out what they're doing, how they're storing it, where it's going, what it's affecting, and crush that down to, I had a flow, a subflow, and a decision table. So future me or Earl or Lauren or whoever has to pick up this thing in a few more years and make some changes, it's so much easier to reverse engineer than looking at somebody's code.
Yeah. And it means that you don't need to assume a level of developer skill in the person who has to pick it up. Like, you might look at this and be like, how does this work? But as soon as you know that these are conditions, there's an and operator between these columns. If it's blank, it's not part of the evaluation, and this is the result. Like, learn, spend a couple hours learning what a decision table is, and then that's in your mind. That's an easy to understand, easy to carry forward thing for infinite use cases. I'm going to quickly show one more thing, and then I think we're pretty much through with the new features. This is the off menu feature. If we go back to our flow here, we've scored the application. The last thing I'll show you is on this last decision table where we're figuring out what staff member is responsible for the application. So I've created an adoption app assignment decision table. You can see that this is in draft state. So because it's in draft state, when we go to Flow Designer, we can't find it here, right? It was called adoption. Yep, not available because we haven't published it yet. So we're still working on it for now. This is looking at the pet type and the time zone of the applicant, and that's going to figure out who's responsible for the application. And what we've added, let's say this is going to be staff member. Can't get that one right. This is a reference. It's going to be a user. And I think we've all had the experience of the way some ServiceNow tables are used for so many different purposes and have endless lists of records. if we add this as it is to our decision table,
You get all the users.
you get every user.
Oh, yeah.
It is overwhelming. There are only, some of these might be applicants, some of them might be staff, some of them might have different purposes. So what we have released now is the ability to add reference filters. Makes life so much simpler. So we can add a filter here and just say, is this person adoption agency staff? Yes. Great. Then when we come back into our list, look at that. These are the only people we have to choose from.
Very nice. Show offs. Show off.
Life is so much simpler now. We can quickly and easily create this decision table.
That's nice.
We can fill out who's responsible for what.
I noticed those are not display values, though. Those are.
I was just mucking around with what the display values are. They are the display values.
Oh, okay. Whew.
Yeah.
Scared me.
Don't worry. This is a Julia exploring around her instance situation. It's not nothing's broken. So if you had the full name as the display value, that's what would show up here.
Can the default result be a list of values? Or
default result can only be the same type as the type here. So we don't currently support lists as a result type. So this is because this field type is reference, the default result needs to be a reference.
Got it. That's cool. You all are really tackling all of the quality of life stuff. Decision tables.
That's like music to my ears. Thank you so much. Let's save this. It's looking good. I'm going to be bold and just not test it and publish it. Let's just go crazy. And then now that it's published, if we go back to our flow, we can find this assignment decision table and put it in here and just link this to the application record. And then, we don't actually need to do branching because we don't want to do anything different in our flow based on who it's assigned to.
Yep.
And then we can finish with the beautiful step that I love, which is when you just take that application record and we update the fields based on our decision. So here we already are updating the score with the score from this decision table, and we can update the staff assigned with the result of that last decision. So from here, we can look and find that staff member. And now what we've done is, with a few detours along the way and a few tests and updates, we've created a flow that looks at when an application is created, checks the finances of the person of the application. It checks whether they're eligible for a pet. If they're eligible, we figure out what the score is for the application. We figure out which staff member it should be assigned to, and then we actually make those updates. And from there, we could, continue on. We could add a notification step to that staff member. We can add an update to the person who submitted the application. We can just go to town building this flow. But if we change any of this logic, if we change that scoring like we already did, if somebody leaves the organization and we need to change who the staff are that are responsible, we can make all of those changes without ever touching this flow, and it will still continue to work successfully.
Yay!
Woohoo!
Julia, I have one more thing to ask about.
Please.
And it's probably just a Chuck thing, and I'm pretty sure I know what your answer is going to be. So if you go back to your main platform UI tab,
yep,
the next experience, and you go to all, type decision. Down under system definition, you have decision tables, which lists them in a standard list format.
It sure does.
Click that.
Yep.
But when you open one of those, it brings up Decision Builder on that tab.
You want to bring it up on a new tab.
Well, this is where I think I know what your answer is going to be, because I was just looking at this. Go back up to the All menu.
Yeah.
I think your answer is going to be, Chuck, just go to Decision Builder.
That is my answer. I honestly, to be perfectly honest, I can't remember if we tried to open this in a new tab and that didn't work with the override, the redirect override. Yeah, it's a good question. I can't really remember. I mean, in reality, you should just open Decision Builder and do it that way.
Yeah. I'm thinking otherwise this module has no purpose other than maybe you want to see some additional fields that aren't here. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little bit like when we build new experiences for things that were previously platform, how do we make sure we don't pull the rug out from it under anyone? Right. If they're used to going to this module and they're used to going to things, we can direct them to the new experience, but we don't want them to lose their entry point. And I think as we go release to release, it's worth revisiting. Like, it's been so long since we've had this new experience. Do we need those old entry points? But I know we're always really cautious around doing anything that would break someone's experience that they're used to using. Even if we're going to guide them to a new way of doing things, we don't want them to feel lost.
All right, just in case somebody's followed that same path and went, oh, decision tables. Wait, now I don't have my next experience menu or anything. What happened? Just go to Decision Builder, and you're
go to Decision Builder. Here you go. Nice experience. It opens in a new tab.
Yep, with the same list of stuff.
Yeah. Though I should, throw out with my safe harbor, I'll jump over actually to a quick sum up of some of the things that are coming up for decisions, because I don't want to double down too hard on that. Go to the tabs and go to Decision Builder. One thing that is coming up, and all of this is under safe harbor, but you can look ahead to these things hopefully in the future, is a unified homepage across all of our workflow and automation builders. So right now, if you want to go to Flow Designer, you'd go into that nav and you type Flow Designer. And if you want to go to Decision Builder, you go in that nav and you type Decision Builder. And if you want to go to Process Automation Designer, you go there. And we found that it is confusing for customers to have all of these different homepages that are kind of doing connected things. It also makes it really hard to like discover new stuff, because you have to go to all of these niche areas. So we are rolling out, and I don't know where we are on any sort of like advertising of naming, so I'm just going to steer clear, but there will be announcements coming up about a unified experience to go to one spot and see all your decision tables and see all your processes and see all of your flows and see all of your actions, and then be able to create from there. So
is it a tile in AES, App Engine Studio, yet?
Decision tables?
Yeah.
Okay. We've been integrated in AES with AES since I think San Diego.
Cool.
Yeah. So unified homepage is coming. I think that will make things easier. And then along with that kind of like connected experience, I'll jump down and just reiterate that we are planning for a even more powerful inline authoring experience, so that you're not working in a flow and then duplicating the inputs into your decision table, just really making it as simple as possible. Kind of the way like you can build a subflow or like convert parts of your flow into a subflow.
Yeah.
How can you use data in your flow to easily make a decision table? So that's something we're working hard on. And then we are also, as I mentioned, working on alignment with some of the kind of universal features. So there's things we have in Flow Designer or Action Designer that are also really powerful to have for decisions, like copy decision table, which is something we have across Process Automation Designer and Flow Designer. The ability to generate a code snippet so that you can execute your decision table anywhere you're using code without actually even having to write that code. That's a feature that we have in subflows that we found is really powerful. Also, you'll have the ability to view related flows. So if you have a decision table that's being used in a flow, you can see where it's being used, so that if you do make some of those changes to columns or to inputs, you know where to look to make sure there's no breakage.
Thanks.
We're always looking at making minor and major UI enhancements. How can it be even simpler and easier to build decision tables? One thing we are doing is copy row. So that's like a personal request that right now I have to just keep clicking my drop downs, and I just want the ability to duplicate and change a few values. But
yes,
I think it will make building so much faster and easier. Like the combination of copy decision table and copy row will make people unstoppable.
Well, maybe even less need to export to Excel too.
Yeah, I think for use cases like the one we were looking at today, that really is only like 10 rows, it will make it like Excel won't be the right path for you in most cases. It'll be like, I can just copy a few rows and this will be really easy to change. Then, as I mentioned, we are working on integrating decision tables directly into Process Automation Designer, so that when you have a process, you can execute rules without having to nest them in a subflow. And then additionally, now that we've gotten this start on drafting and publishing, we're working across all of our workflow builders to expand what versioning looks like. What does it mean to keep version history? Do you need the ability to name your versions? Do we need to be able to have multiple drafts? how do we manage, viewing history and reverting. So certainly if you have use cases and strong opinions on any of these things, dare I say, please be in touch. Please be kind. But it's a total joy for all of us to connect with customers and make sure that what we're building is really resonating and providing value to you.
On a similar note, I think Jeffrey in our chat seems to be a power user of decision tables and has been very excited about all the features you've been showing off. So
awesome.
We'll connect you with Jeffrey later if you ever need a person to talk to from the actual using side of it.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jeffrey. It's nice to hear. I can't see the chat from my screen share, so I just like these little nuggets of engagement that I am not fully aware of.
Yeah, I forgot you're not actually seeing this screen. Every time Jeffrey was like, reference filters, this thing, we've been displaying it on the screen. You've had a few people cheering in the audience this whole time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, folks.
Thank you, Julia, for showing us again where we're going with Decision Builder, decision tables. It's a lot of great stuff, a lot of smiles on the faces of the developers. This is one of those things on my list of underutilized features. So the more we can expose developers and low-code developers to it, it makes all the difference. Trust me, I've been there. I've had to digest somebody's old code, and I've had to look at somebody else's flows that use decision tables, and hands down, I want to keep using decision tables going forward.
Great to hear. I enthusiastically agree. And so, yeah, we're doing everything we can to make it as easy as possible and as fast as possible to use decision tables instead of doing things the old way.
All right. And with that, we have reached the top of the hour. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will have more Vancouver content coming up. If you're looking for that, or you want to see if you missed anything, you can go to devlink.sn/Vancouver and get the whole content calendar. Or rewatch this over and over and over again instead of Netflix. It's a wonderful thing to do on a Friday night. Am I the only one? Okay. Well.
No, you can't be the only one.
Thank you again, everybody. Take care.
Thanks so much, everyone.